water do you give them? It kind of depends. I would say some of them, like these guys with these narrow leaves, I usually give them water about once a week. Sometimes I'll skip, you know, when they seem to not need it. But most of the time about once a week. Some of the ones with the wider leaves, like this one, the one I just showed you, the first two that I showed you, they actually prefer to go around 2-3 weeks. Most of the time about 3. So they're, again, another choice that's good on water. This one, I brought this up because this is cool. You can see sometimes you can get dracaenas that are trained into different shapes. And this one, they've got it all kinked up. Again, some way to get some interest into the home. Really make it not just a plant, but a living work of art. Houseplants, you probably, yes.
Is that one also dracaena?
It is also dracaena, yes. That one is Dracaena marginata. A lot of people call it dragon tree. Very, very popular and easy to find a spot for. This one right here has been a big hit. This one's called Tarzan. Looks a lot like a yucca, doesn't it? A lot of the dracaenas do, but most especially this one. And here in the Southwest, you know, a lot of us have that kind of Western and Southwestern decor, and this one just fits right in with it. Looks great, easy care. I usually water those about every 3 weeks or so. So very good on water.
How much water?
How much water? You do want to saturate the soil completely and then let it drain free. And then, you know, just, it's the frequency you want to be careful not to overdo. So don't try to water it with, say, a cup of water or something like that, because it's not really going to soak into the soil and get to all the roots. The plants, houseplants actually do like kind of a small pot. You might have noticed by now, some of these are just in really tiny pots. Big plant crammed into this tiny little thing. They like a tight fit. It helps the soil to aerate better, not stay too wet too long. That can be an issue when you have plants that are indoors and not being exposed to the sun and the wind and the elements. They're not drying out so fast. Outdoors, usually bigger is better, right, when choosing a pot? It's the exact opposite indoors. Keep it as tight as you can without being too tight. You don't want it to be spiraling and be really root bound. Most of these plants are very happy in their pot. They do not need to be repotted. You can take it home today and keep it that way for quite some time. The only one I have here that is ready for repotting is this one. This is a peace lily. Again, another one that's good for medium to high light. It can actually tolerate fairly dim to medium light. The reason why I say don't go less than medium, brighter is preferred, is because, again, it's a flower. If you want the flower, light will help it to produce those flowers. But otherwise, it will actually thrive in less light than that. And even in medium light, it's a little bit better about flowering than most other flowering plants. So that is a very good one right there. Now, a lot of you do have highlight, no problem, yes.
On the peace lily, you said that one was one that needed to be repotted. Do they need to be repotted when they get full?
If I can actually take this out and show you. This one really does, it's not spiraling yet, but it is pretty full in there. You see that how the roots are getting full and tight. It's ready to be repotted. So, but actually, most of the time, especially the dracaenas, they like it tight. So it's not something you have to worry about, which is great because, let's face it, how often do we really want to be having to haul that plant outside and making a mess and repotting it and taking it back in, especially with these bigger ones? You don't want to be doing that. They're heavy. And you're trying to take them up and down stairs, you know, over through the doors and everything. Sometimes it's such a pain. It's really nice to know that you're not going to have to repot very often. If you notice that the plant is needing a lot more water than usual, if it's just seeming really stressed and nothing you do seems to be making it happy, it may be time to repot it. For example, most of these plants want water once a week or less. If you notice that the plant is needing water more than once a week, it probably needs to be repotted. It's just getting root bound. The soil in there might be getting kind of compacted or just used up. So at that point, it's time to repot it. In some cases, you don't even have to go into a bigger pot. You just need to pull it out, put in fresh soil, and redo it that way in some cases. Especially some of these bigger ones. A lot of times what will happen is you'll notice over time the soil level gets lower and lower, the root ball kind of compacts down. So you can actually just pull it out, put it in the same pot, and it's fine. Yes?
Someone told me that with houseplants, you should periodically repot the plants and infuse soil just for the sake of doing that.
Yeah, and that's exactly where we're going. The pot size isn't quite so important in this case as just refreshing that soil. Like I said, it gets to a point where the plant starts stressing out, and you know something's not quite right with it. Sometimes it's good just to go ahead and repot it. You might need to go into a bigger pot. It might be best just to leave it as it is, but put in more. Like I said, the soil level will go down. So when you repot it, make sure that soil level is up near the rim of the pot so that it has as much soil to live on for a while. Yes?
The salt content of the water here is heavy.
Yes.
Could we do something with the water?
So he was bringing out that the salt in our water is pretty heavy. We do have a lot of salt. So what ends up happening is you'll water, on a regular basis, and the plant is absorbing all this excess salt that's kind of building up in the soil. Plant starts absorbing it, and what ends up happening is it causes burning at the tips. You see it's kind of a blackening with a little bit of yellow in there. It's salt burn. That's what that is. You've probably seen it and you thought, what am I doing wrong? What am I not watering you enough? It actually wasn't you, it's just a buildup of salt. The only way to really avoid that is to use filtered or bottled water, but it would have to be the kind of bottled water that doesn't have salt added to it. It has to be like distilled. A lot of these plants, they don't need that much water, so it's economical enough that you could just buy, say, a jug of distilled water every month. What are they, 97 cents for a jug? It's for a gallon. So that may be an option for you. A lot of you have filtration systems that will help with that, as long as salt isn't being added into the water. So yes, that is a common problem. If you do see the salt burn, in a lot of cases you can snip it off. But don't do it at a straight angle like this. Do it, kind of match the shape of the leaf. You can do that. So if I were to say, doing this one, I would kind of, if this had burn at the tips, I would cut it, sort of tracing parallel to the edge of the leaf to make it look like a natural leaf. So you can do that without it looking too ugly. But some plants would have it more than others. The more often the plant gets watered, the more salt is going into that soil. So those are often the ones that get the worst. So it's not so bad with some of these bigger ones. The bigger the pot, less often you have to water. A bigger pot just stays moist longer. That's all there is to it. You can see I've got a dragon tree here. Sorry, I have to pull this over so that you guys can see it on the camera. So here we've got this dragon tree, and I've got a pretty big pot. You rarely see a pot that big on any kind of Dracaena. I know it doesn't look that big if you compare it to outdoor plants, but for a Dracaena, that's actually a pretty big pot. I think I've watered it once since it came in this month. So, they just don't need as much water, especially if it's not too tight in there. Put this here. Again, color. Like I said, a lot of you have good lighting situations. Some of those newer houses, they've got really big windows. Some of them have Arizona rooms. I know there's a few Arizona rooms in this neighborhood. So you have a lot of good light. So it's just a matter of finding something that really suits your taste. Lots of things that you can pick from. Again, flowers. Lots of color, different shapes. Plenty you can do with the flowers. I've got Cassandra down there in the store with the orange flowers. We've got a lot of these pound chloes in different colors, red, yellow, pink. I've got cyclamen down there, gorgeous, vibrant colors. African violets, very popular, actually. That surprises some people, but the African violets are the most popular flower down there. I've got even more coming in next week. I'm actually putting in an order for houseplants today. We kind of missed our deadline due to a miscommunication last week. I had hoped to have everything in by the time you guys arrive today, but we have another order coming in next week. We'll have even more color. Hopefully I'll have some purple pinch plant, better known as Wandering Jew. That's the one that's got a purple and silver leaf, and it glitters. If you haven't seen it, it's gorgeous. So hopefully I'll be able to get some of those in. We'll definitely have plenty of color. This one, I love this. Isn't that gorgeous? This is Snow Queen. Again, I love how bright it is. It's just bright and happy, and it'll brighten up just about any corner. Put this on a tall plant stand or hang it from the ceiling and just let it drape down. Beautiful, beautiful plants. When it comes to house plants, like I said, a lot of these plants are adaptable. You put them indoors where there's a lot less light than there is outside. How do they survive like that? Well, what they do is they slow down their growth rate. And that allows them to survive, even thrive for many months or even years in terrible situations regarding light. So because of that, you can put these in those tougher spots, or even just bringing them indoors, which a lot of plants you can't do. You know, a lot of these plants that we're selling outside, you would try to bring those in, and you'll immediately find you're having issues with them. They're not adaptable. These tropicals and subtropicals, they're adaptable. Because their growth rate does slow down, when you put them in dim areas, I would say you might want to go bigger. Think about how big you want the plant to be. That's the size you really should be buying. A lot of times, you'll see plants that it's really just a cutting, a few cuttings stuck in some soil, and you're going to have to wait for that to grow out into a real plant. If you don't have the right conditions, it's not going to happen. So that's why we specialize in bringing in the full, complete plants ready to go where you want it and look beautiful. So always consider that when purchasing your plants. Some of them are just slow growing to begin with, like the Dracaenas. They'll put on about 6 inches a year. These can actually grow really fast when they have good light, but put them in the darkness, it'll take years for them to look like anything. But like I said, that's how they live. That's how they survive. That's why you can turn that into a house plant. Yes? How do I water this? So I do usually, like this one I can water from above, and that's okay. If you're having trouble doing that, you can water from underneath. Typically what I'd like to do with these, because it is such a full plant, I'll put it in a saucer, water it, let it sit in the saucer, because a lot of the water is going to run straight through without being absorbed by the soil. Let it sit in the saucer for a while. I know everybody's always thinking, oh, you're always being told, don't let anything sit in the saucer too long. Too long is bad, but you do want to leave it in there for a little while. Let it wake up that water, because it didn't absorb it when you first watered it. So let it sit in the water for a while. Give it a good 10 minutes, even 20 if you need to. and then you can take it out. So you can put it in a tub or in a saucer. I actually have a plant like this at home, and I have it in a cover pot. And so that I don't even have to take it down actually, because it's actually not, in this case I don't want to water it while it's just hanging, because the water would run through it. But I've got one hanging in a cover pot which has no drainage holes, so it's a pot sitting inside of the pot, and that cover pot catches the water, but so that it can't make a mess. That way I don't have to take it down every time I water it. One thing I love to do, you see I brought some big pots up here. See, a lot of you love to garden, but you can't do the things that you really want to outdoors, or you want to do the things that you do outdoors and bring them indoors. You can have just as much creativity inside. You like to make potted arrangements with flowers and plants outdoors. You can do that inside too. I do it all the time. I could take, say, this guy, and put him in here, and I could grab some hanging plants. This is a type of philodendron called Brazil. You can see it's very big. It's got some yellow stripes in there. I can put that in there and play with the side. Put you in there too. Do I have another one? And just fill that up. I can do things like that. Woo. Okay, put you in there. You can really have fun with designing your house plants. So a lot of people have a little trouble picking out their pots. Don't be afraid of picking out plants and pots that are vibrant, that are colorful. Look at your color palette, look at your artwork. What are your brightest colors in that palette? You can actually pick that brightest color. Artwork and plant life. Those are two things that really should stand out and be showcased. They should have vibrant color or patterns that stand out. This one, I've got a red pot here. You can see it looks beautiful. I could put that in all kinds of different types of decor, and it would look fabulous. This one right here, not a bright color, but it's got this really cool pattern and sort of texture to it. So that's something else I could play with. Right now, grays are really in for interior decorating. Sometimes something like this could really go well with that, or you may want to go with the red pot because the rest of the room is already gray. Put in the accent color. Don't be afraid to branch out with that color and contrast what you've got. You've got tans and neutrals. Go with the red, go with the aqua blue and the turquoise. It'll really go well with that. So don't be afraid to do that, yeah.
Are you actually saying plant those in there or just put them around the big pot?
The question was, should you plant them in there or just put them around the big pot just as I did?
Yeah.
You can do either, depending on the size of the pot. If the pot is really big, it may be too big for those plants. Like I said, house plants kind of like it tight. If it's a really big pot, and it may be that the roots are going to be swimming in soil, what can end up happening is that the soil stays wet too long. It's not drying out and airing out really well, and after a while it will actually get a smell. So it may be good just to do what I did just now and just set them in there. Another option is to take a pot. Do I have an extra pot here? I thought I did. Let's see. Okay, maybe not at the moment. Take a pot.
There's one over here. There's one in the card over here. That's what we're looking for.
I'm going to show you something I do all the time. Take a pot. It can be a pot, just some kind of plastic cheap pot, because no one's ever going to see it. It could be something like this. It could be a used pot that some of the plants came in. Some of these plastic pots like this. Take those, just as long as it's a nice sturdy one. Don't get the real flimsy ones that are almost ripping apart. Get a nice sturdy one, put it upside down inside this big decorative pot, and then you can fill the rest of it with soil. That way you don't have nearly as much soil just sitting there at the bottom underneath the roots, starting to rot and get rancid. It's almost like, kind of like an aerator. Some of you, especially if you came from the East, you're used to putting aerators at the bottom of your pot. It's kind of like that, only a much bigger one. For a really big pot, I'll use a 2-gallon or a 5-gallon pot in order to aerate that soil, so that it's not just a lot of soil without roots going rancid. Or, like I said, you could just do it this way. From here, you actually can't tell that they're just sitting in there, that they're not really planted. So have fun with it. Yeah?
Are these all watered to seed? Is that why you put them together and plant them?
So thank you for bringing that up. Are these all watered the same? So that is something you want to consider. If they're all going to be planted together into the soil, it's all sharing the same soil, they do need to have the same watering needs. And of course, similar lighting needs, of course. So in this case, actually, I probably could put them together, or it might even be better to go with a marginata instead of a Tarzan, just because they take a little more. Again, this one only needs water every few weeks. The Chinese evergreen, only every few weeks. The lipstick, I think I do that one maybe about 3 weeks. I'd say the philodendron, I have these in potted arrangements. And of course, when there's more sort of soil surrounding the roots, they don't go dry nearly as fast. But still, they kind of need it every 1 or 2 weeks. So I would change this or change that. So yes, I would probably switch this out for something else. But like I said, it's not too far off. So I would say, get creative, but do be mindful of whether their needs are going to match up. Okay, why that's called lipstick plant is because it has a tubular flower, dark red, and it comes out of a sheath that kind of looks like a lipstick tube. So that's why it's called lipstick. Of course, that may depend on how much light and fertilizer it's getting, but the leaf itself is just fantastic. And like I said, I put it in medium light situations and it does great. Yes? How often should you fertilize? I would say with houseplants, because we've got them in those little pots, it is better to put them, to give them a liquid fertilizer. Good old plant Schultz. Remember Schultz? Everybody remember Schultz? If you didn't have it, your grandmother did. Everybody used Schultz. So this is something that has been used forever. And it's just, you put a few drops of this into the water whenever you water or whenever you think about it. You can do it, the way that it works, you can use just a few drops each time, or you can use several drops less often. Sometimes when it comes to houseplants, I'm not always the best about remembering to fertilize, and I keep thinking, I gotta do that, I gotta do that. But a little goes a long way with this stuff. The Schultz foods, because of the formulations, they're pretty versatile. This one is just a general plant food. This one is African Violet Plus. They actually can be used on just about everything. So don't worry about getting 10 different fertilizers. I've seen people do that. They come in, they've got the foliage plant fertilizer, and the flowering plant fertilizer, and the African Violet fertilizer, and the orchid fertilizer, and stop right there. That's what the fertilizer company wants you to do. Buy 5 different things when you only need 1. So just pick one that has a good formulation that kind of fixes everything. I use African Violet fertilizer for everything flowering. Sometimes I even put on the foliage plants, that's fine. I use this even for orchids. And it works great. My orchids bloom beautifully, so it works. Yes?
Do you fertilize less in the winter?
Do you fertilize less in the winter? Usually, yes. The plants, they do slow down. They are aware of what's going on outside. Plants are very sensitive to the length of the day. They know it's winter, even though they're not out in the sun. They know it's winter, they slow down.
Red, how much light does that?
This is called anthurium. And would say put it in a bright light situation. This is actually Hawaii's state flower. So they're used to being in a place that has plenty of moisture, plenty of light. They're really not bad on water though. I still only water them once a week. So don't think that just because it came from an island, it's going to tax you on water. Don't worry. They're actually pretty easy.
Would it survive in like semi-light?
Would it survive in semi-light? Maybe, but would it bloom? Again,
that's the whole point.
yes, the plant does need light in order to bloom.
Okay.
And so, yes, a lot of these flowering plants, if you put them in medium light, they'd survive, but they look pretty. So that's where that comes in.
And if you can say a few words about the air plant as a giver.
Oh yes, thank you for reminding me, I had those. So, really popular right now. Air plants and succulents, that is all the rage. Look in any of the fashion magazines, the garden center magazines, and all you see are air plants and succulents. That's everything right now. Let me reattach this. So an air plant, basically, these are plants that come from tropical areas. They don't grow in soil. They grow up in the trees and on logs and things like that. The roots find some place to attach themselves. The roots are not responsible for keeping the plant alive. All they do is anchor the plant so that it doesn't get blown around and broken and whatever, especially when flood season comes. So what these do is they absorb moisture and nutrients from the air. Now, this is Arizona. We don't have moisture in the air most of the time. Right now we have a little bit just because we've had some rain recently, but most of the time it is very dry and arid here. So what we do, you can't just leave this out in the air and let it survive on its own. It won't do that here. It'll do that in some other states, but not here. So here, you do want to water it. Generally what you can do is just take the whole plant and soak it in water for about 10-20 minutes, and that'll take care of it right there. Do that once to twice a week, depending on how hot it is or how dry it is in your house. If you put them in a terrarium, that really changes things. Most terrariums these days are open. They're not completely sealed like the ones that were really popular in the 70s. Those were great. They kept in the moisture. They didn't allow that moisture to escape. You could put a plant into those terrariums and just leave it. You never did anything to it, but getting those terrariums started in the first place was a little bit of a pain. You had to make sure the moisture was just right in there, because too much moisture and the plant would rot. I've done that before myself, actually. Too little moisture and the plant isn't getting enough water, so it was a bit of a pain. Most of the terrariums these days are open, so it kind of helps the moisture not to escape so fast. You'll find that you cut your watering in half with these, but you still have to water.
What about misting?
Misting. So she was asking about what about misting? If you're going to mist these plants, you want to get the mist directly on the plant.
Okay.
And do it frequently, because it's not going to be absorbing much water. It's going to be going most of the day without water, other than those few minutes that it had water on its leaves.
And light.
So good light, or even medium light, or a room that uses a lot of artificial light. That's fine. They're not terribly picky. I wouldn't put this in a dark room. Most of these grow in the branches of trees, so they're up high, and maybe the plants underneath the tree are in the dim light or almost no light in some cases, but these are up in the tree getting the sunlight. So they're not great for the dim areas, although they'll last a pretty long time before they finally choke. Pretty versatile. So there's a lot of different kinds. I've got some down there that have color. Generally, they're going to bloom about once a year. Really pretty flowers. It actually is in the bromeliad family. You've seen what kind of flowers they get. Pretty spectacular. It's like that, only smaller. So yeah, you can mist it. Sometimes you'll see me down there just spraying them just to give them an extra treat. But it's not something that you can go once a week. What I would say is don't spray the air. That's not going to do any good. Yeah, generally when we refer to misting, what we're talking about is spraying the air around the plant so that it humidifies it. Doesn't do a whole lot of good in an arid environment. The mist just dissipates immediately and it's gone, and there's nothing for the plant to absorb. And so misting the air isn't going to do a whole lot of good with these. I never recommend to anybody that they mist anything. It's not going to help. It really isn't. You can do other things to humidify, pebble trays, humidifiers, but if you're going to mist it with a spray bottle, actually spray the plant itself. Get the water on the leaves. It'll dry up pretty quick. Yes?
So you have those in your hand. If we buy them like that, how do you plant them or how do you display them?
You can display them any way you like because they don't have to be rooted. That's the great thing about them. You can put them anywhere. You can hang them. You can put them on the wall. Some people will tie a string around them and just hang them. Some people put them in decorative terrariums. You can set it just on the table, in a decorative tray. You go nuts with it. Some people will even, kind of stick them in other plants, and it doesn't look like much in this one, but in other types of plants, it will look really decorative. I could set it in with these others. It doesn't actually have to be planted. I could just set it in there. It'd be fine. So, anywhere. Yes?
Does that apply to succulents also, or succulents completely different?
So yeah, the succulents do have roots. They do live in soil. Put them in a good free draining soil, like a cactus mix. I want to say something about succulents because they are very popular. Everybody's wanting them. So I want to make sure everyone knows how to water these. So generally when you're watering houseplants, what you want to do is let the soil dry out fairly well before watering again. With this, don't go by the soil. Feel the leaf. Feel how soft is that. Is it soft or firm? If it's firm, don't water. Even though the soil is dry, don't water if the leaf is firm. Succulents are meant to live in drought-prone areas and in places where it hardly ever rains. That's what they live in. That's what they want. They don't want to be constantly watered all the time. It will kill them. So the plant will tell you when it's ready to be watered. So just kind of feel that leaf. Anything that is, any kind of succulent that isn't thorny, you could just feel it. Does it still feel firm? Good. We're going to leave you alone. Again, those are great for combining into things, or you can just put them into, that's the wrong size pot, but you can just put them into a pot by themselves when they're this big. Very, very popular right now. I don't have any orchids up here. Did anybody have questions about orchids? You have a question about something?
Light and cactus. I put a cactus in a south-facing window and it burned. Could you talk about that?
So she put a cactus in a south-facing window and it burned. So they're kind of like us. You know how right now we have been indoors all winter and we've been wearing long sleeves whenever we go out. We've lost our tan. And what's going to happen the first warm day when you decide to put on those shorts? You're going to burn because your skin's not used to it. Same thing if the cactus was in a dimmer area for a while and then suddenly got put into the window. The other thing with cactus is that it's actually very rare that cactus are in a dim light area for very long anyway. It could just be that the window actually created a magnifying effect. That's actually more common with cactus. But even a bright loving plant, not just cactus, but any bright loving plant, if it's been in a dimmer area for a little while and then you put it in the sun, it could burn, even though it likes direct light under normal circumstances. We're about going into overtime, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to head down to the houseplant area, and anybody who wants to come with me, we'll look at the different plants. You can ask all of the questions you want, and we'll wrap it up so everybody online can go to work or enjoy their weekend.